This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning or afternoon, everyone. As Norval said, I'm Scott Burgmeyer, and I assume everyone can see my screen because I don't see a bunch of messages or people saying, hey, I can't see anything. So Norval and I did set up. If you do, again, continue to make sure you're on mute so we keep the background noise down. And at any time as we walk through today, if you do have a question, if you want to just pop it into the chat box, I'll just be able to either answer them real time, or I may just pause because it may be a lead into a slide that's coming up. So do appreciate everyone joining us today. We are going to talk about winning with metrics. Just briefly about myself and my company, our organization. We really partner with individuals, and we go down the path of quality process improvement. You can see Six Sigma. We do training assessments. We have a training and learning management system, and I do lead the Baldrige program for the state of Iowa. So at any time, if you want information, you can pop on to our website and peruse around as much as you would like. And so today, when we talk about measures, right, people a lot of times they say, well, why do you use them? Everyone seems to have them. They have dashboards. They're in your performance management system. And when you really step back and think about it, most of us would answer something like, it's really to help us understand what's going on. It paints us a picture of what's going well, where is there risk, where is there problems. Ideally, it helps us make decisions. And sometimes people say, well, because I was told I have to measure this, and the last 3 people in this job before me measured this, so I'm going to measure this. And one of my favorite questions to ask is, if I read all these books, right? So I have this huge library. If I read all these books, do I have knowledge? And many times it's a great conversation with folks, because most people will say, oh yeah, you have all kinds of knowledge because you've read all those books. And Einstein always said, and this is modernized a little bit, but he says, dude, information is not knowledge. And the key is, if you read something, doing something with that information, that's what knowledge is. So the same thing is true about metrics. So if you're really just measuring to put them on the wall or to look at them and say, hey, that's pretty, then that's information. It's not bad, it's just information. What's crucial is transitioning that information or those metrics into doing something with it, into knowledge. And Deming talked about what many organizations do is they look at revenue. And his point was, when you look at revenue, it's like driving a car only looking at the rearview mirror, right? So if you're only looking at revenue and you're only looking at that measure, you're probably missing some things. So I suspect many of you have heard about leading and lagging indicators, and we're going to talk about both of them just for a minute, maybe new for some, maybe a refresher. And when you compare and contrast, a lagging indicator, it measures some kind of goal accomplishment. It's easy to measure. It's hard to influence, right? You look at it and you say, yep, it's good, or nope, it's bad. In accounting lingo, you would say, ooh, it's a black number, it's good, or oh no, it's a red number, that's bad. When you look at a leading indicator, it predicts goal achievement. It's something you can influence, and it can be more difficult to measure. So when you think about and just compare and contrast those two things, lagging indicator is really, it is what it is, and I get it, and I say, oh yay, or oh crud. And a leading indicator is something I can look at typically more frequently and then do something about. So my favorite example is, if I want to be 50 pounds lighter by the end of this year, right? If I step on the scale, that is the lagging indicator, right? It's that moment you step on the scale and you say, yay, or you say, oh, fiddly dee. That's not the number I was hoping for. The leading indicator would be how many calories I consumed, how many calories I burned. These are things, right? I can influence it. It's a predictor of the lagging indicator. They may be hard to track, right? Hard to measure. When you look at it, calories consumed may not be difficult necessarily to measure. Speaking from personal experience, it's the tenacity and the rigor around having a method to then measure that at some frequency so that you actually can predict what that lagging indicator will be. So it's not necessarily that you don't want to sometimes, it's just that the tenacity and the follow-up to do that becomes difficult. So when you look at leading measures and why to use them, right, many times you can then stop collecting or stop having long discussions about things you don't need to do. It allows you to focus your actions on the right things. So instead of, if you think Pareto principle, I can focus on these core items versus all of these measures. You can absolutely improve your outcomes, and it does build knowledge. Now, the challenge, and people will typically say, well, those are great ideas. Using leading measures is not new. This is not cutting edge. I've heard about this many times. Just why don't people do it? Well, truly what happens is we focus on outcomes. So we say, what was our production level? What was our I found a typo, quality error. Our patient satisfaction, our cost. Sometimes I found leaders, it's difficult for the leader to understand the difference between leading and lagging, right? Because that outcome is what they get praised or yelled at for. And so looking at that leading indicator sometimes is counterintuitive. It's hard to measure and track, and it does require you to do something different. Okay, so these are typical reasons that people may not choose to use leading measures. So what I want to walk us through is I learned about a technique called an organization system map about a year ago, and I've started to use this with some of my clients, and it has been interesting, the outcome. And then we'll come back to this idea of leading and lagging measures here in a moment. So when you look at the system map, the green, that top level, is your core goals, right? So this may come directly out of your strategy. It may come from the key things you're trying to accomplish this year or the next 5 years, whatever that is. And what you do is you say, these are those, maybe 3, 2, 5, 7, whatever the number is. You then look at that second level, is you identify what are your key and support processes. Now, if you're a Baldrige geek like I am, that may sound familiar to say, right, what are those? Now, in this example, right, we have sales, manufacturing, engineering, etc. And that becomes consistent. What you then do is you go to each of these processes. So in this example, we're going to focus on the safety and quality process. And with that leader, you identify what are the specific processes or sub-processes that are within the safety and quality realm. And that's that orange or yellow color. So you're really looking at, okay, there's health and safety, there's ISO, customer complaints, etc. And what you then do, and this is where you can really launch from a platform. So you can then get, and it's most powerful when you have a group of individuals from that area together, and they list what are all of the outputs, things that they do within that vertical. So again, if you look at health and safety, they do an OSHA log, a safety assessment, they do a personal protective equipment review, product returns, Six Sigma, they do certified belts, they have a project hopper, dollar savings. And this list I just for this discussion. I just did 3. I've had some organizations that they may have 15 or 20 things in that vertical. The launching platform, when you look at this holistically, is you can very quickly, especially if you have teams that you may have a team that's really focused on Six Sigma, that's part of that safety and quality team, and people may not understand that. So there's kind of silos within the silos, so to speak. And as people start to see the width and depth that you do, people start to have a newer respect for what everyone is dealing with. And why didn't Bob respond to my email that day? Well, because Bob was knee deep in a product return or a customer complaint or whatever that is. And so you start to see that. People then also see, they're part of something really huge, and this can be really inspiring for some of those team members who maybe they only work in the new product and they never see these other pieces. The other power is this can absolutely then map to how do I onboard a new person in that area. And then one of my favorite things is you can start to look at what ones of these are really difficult or are you struggling with? And you may say, oh, we're really struggling with management review within ISO. And you can say, hey, let's do a improvement work there. Or maybe we need some standard work there. So there's a lot of things you can blossom from. And then you can say, well, where do you measure? And people can say, well, we measure our OSHA log, our parts per million report, our dollar savings. There may be other things that they identify. And you can prioritize those. So what's really powerful with the system map is you can really get into it and say, here's everything we do. You can drive roles and responsibilities within one area. You can build training and that foundation of training and onboarding for an individual going into that organization. You can build where do we need to make improvements, and then look at where do we measure or where should we measure because it's really important. I think the last thing that I've seen with a number of organizations when we've done this is a leader may say, well, what is trend analysis in the product returns? And you have a whole conversation of what that is, and the leader may say, I don't know why we do that. And you may identify things that you need to stop, or a leader may say, hey, I don't see this thing on there at all. And they may say, we need to do that because I just realized we haven't been doing that. And it kind of sheds a light. So you can then identify what you measure, what could you measure, and then step into that idea of creating leading and lagging measures for that key and support process. So I'm going to pause there to see if anyone has questions about system map before I go on. And if you do have a question, you can just type it in to the chat box and I'll answer it quickly. Okay, so we have an idea of a few places where you could then create measures from your system map. So now let's go into, now how can I create some of those leading measures based on, and we'll just use an example of the dollar savings for Six Sigma. Right. So the first thing you do is you say, what are the leading indicators what are the lagging indicators I want to create leading indicators on? You create a list of what those options are, how you're going to measure those, going to make sure, are they really lead measures? And you're going to go back to that original list and you're going to say, okay, is it predicting the lagging measure? Can I influence it? And if I say yes, then that is a lead measure. And then typically you're going to have some ideas that are probably more than you can take on, and you can rank them based on how important they are, how easy they are to influence, how easy they are to measure, and then start to measure them. And you'll likely come back and walk through that number 3 and 4 on this list to make sure that they're actually going to work for you. Because likely you're probably not going to pick the right ones immediately. And it's the power of mapping it out and then circling back to see, does it work? Okay. So there is a tool, and I believe Norval, to everyone who registered on Eventbrite, pre-registered, did get a copy of this. So there is a small template that I typically have folks use, and you look at the lag measure. So our lag measure of losing 50 pounds. And so you create your idea. So you go down the list and you say, how many days of exercise, calorie intake, calories burned, how do I want to measure that? And then there's a little test in there, right? So is it predictable, influenceable? Is it something I can measure ongoing? Can it actually be measured? And is it worth measuring? And that can help you then rank where it is, and then give you an idea of whether you want to use it or not use it. Okay? So what I wanted to do is give folks a little bit of time to take an idea of one lag measure you'd like to explore and create some lead measures for, and give some folks time to actually do that. And then if you wanted to share, I believe Norval can make your computer share, and you can share that and kind of, we can look at it as a group and get some ideas. So any questions before we start that? People have an opportunity to build some lead measures. All right, if no questions, we'll do about 7 minutes to give you a chance to put some things together, and then we'll swing back and see if anyone wants to share. So a couple of you have reached out and said, hey, can you send me the template? So if you send me your email, either in the to everyone or as a private, I can quickly send you that. I saw 3 of you have asked, so you should all have that. So give folks just a minute to take a peek at that.
Yeah, my apologies. I sent the template out to everybody probably 15, 20 minutes before we got started, so some people may not have looked in their email.
Okay, is there anyone who would like to share some examples? I'm seeing a couple messages. I believe everyone who's messaged me, I've sent it to you. A couple people are saying they want to see some examples. So does anyone have any examples that they would like to share? And then we can pass you the presentation.
Yeah, if you can type your name into the chat box and let me know, I'll go ahead and make you the presenter here temporarily if you do want to share.
Or if you don't want to share, if someone has one that they would like to work through, we could work through that together. So Norval, would you be, everyone's so shy today. That's okay. It is Monday. Norval, would you be willing to use the webinar participant as an example? Oh, customer complaints versus total projects. Excellent. Thank you, Emily. So customer complaints, let's talk through, and I'm just going to switch my screen, and I'm going to open up that Excel template for us, and we'll just work it right on the screen if that's okay. Okay, so our lag measure is customer complaint. So internal, Emily's given us some NCP. What's NCP? Non-conforming product, I'm guessing. Customer satisfaction. Number of needed final inspections. Okay. Are there other ideas that could be lead measures for customer complaints that anyone might have in your experience? schedule clients. Thank you, Clayton. What I'm wondering is like rework or scrap rates. So if this is our list, our brainstorm list, again, we're doing this on the screen. You could do this in a number of ways, right? You could do it and affinitize it. You could just brainstorm with sticky sticky notes and just have people pop them up on the board. So how would you measure? How do you currently measure internal nonconformance? Is that the same as rework and scrap? So it's the number of events and the dollar. Okay. So what you can do is either way, you can go across or you can build it down. I think what would likely be helpful is we went across. So the question here is for internal non-conforming product, is this number of events or dollar signs, is that predictive of customer complaints? And I suspect it is. I'm going to make the assumption that it is while Emily's typing to me, so I get her perspective as well. Is it influenceable? So can I do something about the number of events? And I suspect I probably can. I may not be able to do something every time, but I can take action if the rate goes up or down. So I can influence it. Is it something you can measure ongoing? So can you measure the number of events or the dollars every day or every week or whatever frequency? Absolutely yes. Can it be measured? So I'm assuming yes. This is sometimes difficult because depending on your organization and what it is, the ability to measure, and this could be related to the level of effort to measure it. So things, if it's automated and things are bar-coded, it becomes really easy. If you have to go count and look and inventory thousands of things every day, it may be really difficult, right? So then, yes, it's absolutely worth measuring, Emily said. So again, you look at that, all of those are yes. I typically wouldn't rank that until I have all the other ones. So let's do one more row, and I'd like to just go to this number of needed final inspections. So Emily, how do you currently measure that? Well, it's not currently a measure. Very good. Okay, so so how could we measure that? So we could count it. We could do like number of events. We could count dollars. Absolutely surveys. So someone said surveys. Okay, so the number of needed final inspections. And then, so is this predictive? So does this give us an idea of impact to lag measures? Is it influenceable? So can I do something about it? Yes. Is it ongoing? This is one where it's an ad hoc situation, so it's probably not, you could measure it all the time, but many times you might be at a zero, okay? So it is ongoing, but you may have zero. Can it be measured? Yes. Is it worth measuring? And just for discussion purposes, we'll say no. So you could do this, and really as a group, you could identify which ones, and typically what I say is if you have all yeses, that probably is going to outrank something that has a no. And so you could very easily say, well, yeah, we're going to try that, and we're not going to try that one for right now. Now, I purposely skipped customer satisfaction because you could measure that as with surveys. The challenge is customer satisfaction is typically a lag measure. And what will happen as you start to brainstorm ideas for measures is you will probably come up with some lag measures. And what you'll say is it predictive? So will this predict the number of customer complaints? I would actually probably say it's the other way. If I have high customer complaints, it will probably impact customer satisfaction. So there's a relationship there. It's a different relationship. And it's okay if you identify additional lag measures. That doesn't mean you did bad, doesn't mean it's wrong. It's part of the brainstorming process where you'll identify things that you may not meet, and that's okay. So before I go on, I know someone had said they wanted to see some examples. Was that helpful to walk through an example like that? Or any questions? I see lots of good feedback and information coming through on the chat there, so that's great. Okay, Emily, you're very, very welcome. So what I'd like to do, I'm going to flip back to the presentation. And just as we go, so that's really an example of how you can create a lead measure. And what's really fun about this, what I found with this template and doing this is it does take some time, if you go down the system map route to build that, it is very helpful to do that. What I found really helpful is once you get this up on a screen or get people talking about it, we just identified some potential lead measures, some of which sounds like Emily's organization is already measured, and some maybe that isn't. But now you can start to think about, if I see that trend of non-conforming product go up, I need to pay attention to the risk or the potential that our customer complaints or customer satisfaction may go down, and to start to look at what are the things you need to do to be proactive versus, oh, darn it, I got a customer complaint and I need to go do something. So as you look at lead measures, a couple tips on how to win, right? Really look at what your key and support processes are and do your system map. I cannot emphasize that enough. That is so helpful. Begin to eliminate those measures that you're using for information only. Sometimes you have to because corporate said or the boss said. That's okay. That's just how it is. But if there's ones that you're really not using to take action or using to make a decision on, start to question, why are we even using them? And then start to look at your top 1, 2, or 3 lagging measures, and then create those leading measures and have conversations about them at more frequent intervals. Many times lagging measures are looked at monthly or quarterly, and look at what could I look at weekly or every 2 weeks to give me an indication of how we're progressing so I can be proactive. And if you're an ISO organization, these are great things you can also show from a improvement perspective, from a quality metrics perspective. It's a great way to showcase your risk prevention, especially with the 2015 version of the standard. So with that, I will leave you my contact information. You can email me if you want to have a specific conversation. I'm absolutely at the youcanbook.me site. You can click that. You can set up some time. Happy to have a conversation with you. Not a problem at all. I will flip to so if you want that, that's there. And then, of course, just references just for information where some of these resources came from that you can look at. So if any questions, anything people want to dive into, I am all ears. Or you can type it in the box. And Connie, you are very welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Scott. We have time for questions for Scott. Looks like we got about just under 15 minutes to go. Question from Nitsa, can you show the references again? There they are. Okay, it looks like we're not getting too many questions here, Scott.
That's okay. I muted myself, and I was having a great conversation to answer Emily's question.
Oh, okay.
Wonderful. That's okay. Emily's question was, what's my favorite resource or best resource? The 4 Disciplines of Execution from Covey, sometimes called 4DX, is a great way to look at organizationally how to use it. The top one, using leading indicators to drive sustainability, that is a great reference of how to, and that template I really built between 4DX and that using leading indicators. Oh, Cheryl asked a really tough question. When you have a factor that is not predictive, how do you plan for future goals? Excellent question. My 2 favorite ways are flip a coin and magic 8-ball. The most difficult, and so I think when you look at an example, and hopefully no one is in this situation, but I think sales, if sales is not predictive, or quality rejects is not predictive, if you have history, you can look at history and do some analysis to predict the future. If you really have that much variation and up and down, I have not found a good way to plan a future goal other than to doing that historical analysis and then also looking at what will actually be different in the process. So if there's nothing that you're changing in the process, then you would probably argue something like the last several years is probably what you're going to get again. Cheryl, I know that doesn't probably fully answer your question. That's just been my experience. If it's truly something you can't predict, you have to look at that.
Scott, you've got a typo in the
I see that.
link. Yeah.
Looks like the reference is off. So SMRP, that's awesome. 2 typos in one presentation. So someone who is a black belt, if you want to do the DPMO, that'd be great. Clayton asked, how do you prevent things like employees reducing the number of non-conformance reported to meet a metric? Yes. So I think Clayton's saying, hey, I know we have non-conformances, however, they get a bonus if the number is low. So how do you get them to actual report? Well, it's kind of interesting because if you look at it from a metric alignment, is something we didn't talk about. In this case, the metric is not aligned, right? So the end metric, where you say, I really want to know how many nonconformances we have, there's a conflict with the number. Things I've done to take that on is to look at alpha miss and beta miss. So beta miss is by definition, if I say, or type 1, type 2 situation, right? Beta miss is I said the product was good, but it was actually no good. Alpha miss is I said the product was no good, but it was actually good. So number of times what I do is I look at, especially if you track rework. So if you track rework and people are actually, they had nonconformances, however, they did the work to correct it, but they didn't record that they corrected, is comparing amount of rework or time spent on rework compared to nonconformances reported. And again, Clayton, I don't know what your industry is, and most they say, hey, this kind of rework takes 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever to take. And if you're not seeing that, if that data doesn't align, then you can see that and start to look at how do you course correct that, if that helps. Great question. No one right answer. The right answer is change the metric to say accuracy in reporting gets you the pat on the back versus the number of rework. Good, great question. Other questions? Great questions.
Okay, it looks like we have a little more than 6 minutes left. We're going to go ahead and remind everybody that next Monday will be our next webinar, and it is on October 1st. It'll be Accelerated Life Testing for Speedier Product Development, Problems and Strategies with Sarath Jayatalika. Wow. Who is a corporate reliability engineer with Daikin Applied Americas. I believe he's in Minneapolis. So looking forward to that next Monday. So we do have a few more minutes left. If anybody does have a question they'd like to sneak in at the last few minutes, feel free to do so. Scott, any other closing comments?
No, I appreciate everyone's attention and great questions. Again, Norva, I appreciate the invite to talk about metrics is one of my favorite subjects, and it's so much fun to play in and talk with organizations about. So yeah, and if you do have any questions after, definitely don't hesitate to reach out.
Great. Let's see here. So I'd like to go ahead and thank Scott for presenting for us today. Thank you, Scott.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And thanks to all of you. Let's see, the direct link. Do you have a direct link to the SMRP link?
I'm going to track it down right now.
Okay. Oh, to the article.
To the article. I'll find it here. I'll find it and post it here. Just give me. You continue, Norval, and I'll find it.
Yeah, we've got a couple minutes here. We can kind of pause here for a few seconds. We can answer any other questions if anybody has them. I don't see any others coming, so looks like we're pretty much wrapping up here for right now. Scott, how good are you at multitasking?
I'm okay.
A question.
Employee turnover has a predictive measure. Oh boy. So I've seen it as Chris, you bring up a really interesting point. There are some lag indicators that are lead indicators of other lag indicators. So, as an example, employee turnover absolutely is a predictor of, the easy ones are like hiring, etc. It is a predictor of engagement. So I could see that turnover likely is going to have a similar trend as your employee engagement survey, if you have that one, as well as I've seen absenteeism be a predictor of turnover. So if I have high absenteeism, I likely have high turnover.
Okay. I'm assuming that you're still looking for the article that Jerry
I am looking. Yeah, I am, and I'm not finding it at the moment, but
okay.
That's just fun.
Okay. Well,
so go ahead. And Jerry, if you want to email me your email address, that way we don't have to hold up everyone, and I can look for it offline, and send it to you.
Okay, that sounds like a plan. All right. Yeah. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here then for today. I'd like to thank Scott once again, and also thank all of you who are still with us for joining us today. We'll look forward to seeing many of you next week. We'll get the registration, everything set up for next Monday too, because it has not been created yet. So, and I will send Nitsa the template. I do have that. So until then, next Monday, I hope everybody has a great rest of the day. Thanks a lot. Bye now.
Thanks all.
This conference will now be recorded.